The summer before starting this class, I believed that I was a good reader and a good writer. I spent a lot of time reading and annotating The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and writing essays in the classic 5-paragraph structure that I thought were really good and I was really proud to turn in, only to receive a 5. Now, I never really thought there was any other way of writing essays other than the 5-paragraph structure, and because I felt like I'd mastered that 5-paragraph structure, I believed myself to be a good writer. But since joining this class, however, I've had a huge wake-up call to realizing what being a good writer really is. It's not about finding the topic and just providing a few simple paragraphs of support like I had before, but being a good writer is about using rhetoric to bring the piece to life. It's also about being an inventor and creating ideas, making a piece that's not only writing, but a piece of art. And most importantly, it's about scuba diving and understanding the deeper meaning underlying every piece of writing, and not just skimming the surface, but understanding the meaning that the author might not just directly point out. So one of the first pieces that we wrote was by Nabokov, and one paragraph that really stuck out to me was when he said, "There are 3 points of view from which a writer can be considered. He may be considered as a storyteller, as a teacher, and as an enchanter. A major writer combines these 3, storyteller, teacher, enchanter, but it is the enchanter in him that predominates and makes him a major writer." This really stuck out to me because it really made me think of writing as more of creating a piece of art instead of just writing, I guess, because before I'd always just written the 5-paragraph structured essays, and by learning about the 2-page essay format, I learned to be a lot more concise and detailed. And in my first essay that we wrote about Huckleberry Finn, the very first response, I started with a huge paragraph that had background information and a thesis that said, "Huck Finn grows and changes not only mentally but physically, which is why I believe that Huck Finn is a dynamic character." And since learning about the tightening of the thesis and how it can make the essay a lot better, I changed it to, "In the controversial novel, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, Huck Finn goes through a major internal conflict regarding his identity." And I added a lot of things in this in my second response to make it more in-depth and never mind. So another major point in Nabokov is being a good writer is being an inventor. And I also noticed and connected this to Francine Pose's essay, and where she says, "Creativity cannot be transmitted from teacher to student." And so this gave me a little hope because I was not born with a lot of creativity when it comes to writing. And so it made me think how I can bring this creativity into my writing. And so another sentence that she wrote was, "Like most, maybe all writers, I learned to write by writing, and by example, by reading books." So instead of just writing one rough draft and revising it, I have been writing a ton of drafts for each of my papers and just practicing writing and practicing making everything tight and concise. And also I've started mimicking styles that I see in books that I read by other authors. For example, when I read the book called Speak, I started to notice how the book was structured as short, choppy paragraphs that were just kind of random thoughts, and you weren't really told directly what was going on, but more so given clues as to what was going on. And so later on in my journal, I went on to also note that there was titles for each of the sections of the book, and I really liked the way the author set it up. And so I tried kind of mimicking that style along with others that I saw doing Article of the Week. I liked a lot of the endings in some of the articles, like ending with a rhetorical question, and there was many others that I wanted to copy. And along with finding creativity in my writing, I also wanted to find a way to establish my own credibility as a writer, because in the appendix and the Benjamin Banneker's letter to Thomas Jefferson, I got to see each way in different ways that they established their credibility, and got examples to how I could establish my own. And so in Benjamin Banneker's letter to Thomas Jefferson, he kind of butters up Thomas Jefferson, and I really like that, and I really like seeing how he didn't overly push it and overly use his pathos, and how that really established his credibility. And then I also got to see in the appendix how he really pushed it, his pathos, which kind of hurt his credibility. And so I started really thinking about audience and my credibility, and in one of the reading journals for the appendix to the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, I talked about how he's using pathos to win people over, mainly with the use of empathy and religion, which are two really heavy topics. And he contrasts Christianity of the land and Christ in a way that could be really offensive or hurt some Christians. And this really had me change my writing and relook things that could be considered offensive, I guess. And also, it helped me add in things that would be persuasive to a certain topic and certain crowd. And I also liked how Banneker used a lot of compliments appealing directly to Thomas Jefferson to persuade him to take action, which made me think a lot about how I wanted to persuade my audience and what I really, what the purpose of my writing was. And I just liked the way that he established his credibility. And it also made me think of the emotion in which the audience feels for the writing, because you can really play it up to win them over. And then last, overall, I started really looking in depth to the pieces that we were writing. I started off with my reading journals, not really going in depth, but just answering the questions provided. So for Good Readers and Good Writers, which was the first piece that we really read, I started off by saying the main intro is the first little paragraph, which isn't really, which is pretty obvious, but it's the answer to the question. And then further down in our reading journals, I talked about how Thoreau was rebellious and confident using his ideas, and how he put in his thesis in a different way. So I really elaborated on the idea of the thesis instead of just telling how it was. And so I've really started to, scuba dive and dive deeper into the meanings. And I've done this also with my reading journals a lot. Because the very first one I wrote, the beginning of The Glass Castle really drew me in. The way she talks about how strange her family is right off the bat is really intriguing to me. But what surprises me the most is her embarrassment about her family. And although this is a journal, it's not as deep as I could have gone. For example, for journal number 11, I talked about the layout and structure of the book that I was reading and how the paragraphs were different. This is the one about Speak. And how it was starting to get more, like the tone of it was starting to get more twisted. And then even later on, I talked about the author's motives for writing the piece because it's so strange and dark. And so I really started going deeper into each meaning. And overall, I have learned a lot about adding creativity to bring the piece to life and diving deeper into the meaning. Peace out.